Let's keep going with prisons. While the United States represents about 5% of the world's population, it also houses around 25% of the world's prison population. A lot of those prisoners are held in jails in the state of Texas. Our next story is about the oldest Texas state prison in a small town called Huntsville.
Huntsville's main street is an unimposing place. It's Texas's version of quaint, small-town America. Yet a quarter of this city's population is made up of convicted criminals. Thankfully, they're behind bars, locked up on the other side of Huntsville's several kilometres of barbed wire fences. Jim Willett is no stranger to prisons. He worked at Huntsville's main unit for more than 30 years.
We've got 5 prisons inside these city limits that hold about 9,000 inmates. So in a town our size, that's a big chunk of the people.
Huntsville has the rather dubious claim to fame that there are more prisons here than in any other town in Texas. 9 in total, 5 within the city limits and another 4 outside, including the Holiday Unit that houses 2,100 inmates. But despite being surrounded by thousands of criminals, the people who live here have got used to it. Indeed, it's estimated 40% of the city works for the prison system. So for many, living and working among inmates has become second nature.
You know, when you come here for the first time, it probably, the way you feel right now, that it's just unbelievable that you have all these prisons here. But if you're raised here, or if you've come here and stayed for a while, you get real accustomed to it, real used to it. It's just a part of the city.
Brian McGivern is an attorney working to improve living conditions for prisoners at a time when mass incarceration is increasing dramatically.
Starting in 1970, the rate of incarceration around the country began to skyrocket, and Texas was no exception. Since 1970, our prison population has increased over 960%, even though our population has only doubled. The state went on essentially a building spree of prisons throughout the 80s and the 90s. Well, shockingly, during that building spree, they cut a few corners. And as a result, our prisons are essentially built like giant metal sheds, you know, with metal walls and very little insulation.
The state now has more people in jail per capita than anywhere in the world. A staggering 70,000 new people enter the prison system each year. And every 2 years, the state creates new jailable offences. Primarily, McGivern believes, to help politicians win elections.
Really, it devolves to a basic political dysfunction in the state where we love to put people in prison, but we don't actually want to spend anything for it. Our state legislature, it's very hungry to create new crimes because nobody ever lost an election because they were too tough on crime. But they have no appetite to pay for that system. I mean, it's a great unfunded mandate, and the people that ultimately suffer as a result are the people who are not being housed in constitutionally adequate conditions.
For private prisons run by for-profit companies, more criminals means more money. A disproportionate number of Hispanics are housed in private jails, and Congress could approve a request for $3.7 billion to lock up more illegal immigrants, money that will certainly make its way to private companies.
It's hard to put a thumb on what's too many. I mean, if there's that many criminals out there that the public thinks needs to be locked up, I can't say that it's too big. We have a huge state after all, but it does, the bigger it gets, the harder it gets to handle.
Willett has retired and now runs the Texas Prison Museum, where the city's macabre past and present is on display. Just a few miles from here is the state's death chamber, where inmates are sent for execution. The electric chair used to be the tool of choice. Now, Texas delivers death with a lethal injection. During his 3 years in charge of Huntsville Prison, Willett oversaw 89 executions.
I don't have a problem with the death penalty. Now, I'm also one that you'll never see out protesting someplace in favor of it, but I don't have any problems with the death penalty.
Life in this prison city, so close to criminals and never far from execution, seems strangely surreal. But many of the residents, like Willett, have lived and built their life around serving this insatiable prison system. Nick Harper for Telesaur, Huntsville, Texas.